So someone came to your house, took over your house, and made you their houseboy.
Why the hell are we going after Zimbabwe? When you think about the countries the US is punishing with financial and trade sanctions, most people know of Iran or Cuba or Venezuela. But the United States has actually maintained a severe sanctions regime against Zimbabwe for the last 21 years, and it hardly gets mentioned in the media. And the worst part is, these sanctions were essentially put in place because Zimbabweans took back their own land from European settlers. Here's what you need to know. Zimbabwe, like many other regions of Africa, was colonized by European powers in the late 19th century. The various European powers met at the Berlin Conference in 1884 and divided up the continent, deciding which powers would control which regions. The British Empire, one of the strongest European powers at the time, decided that it would take massive portions of northern and southern Africa, including Zimbabwe. The man responsible for overseeing Britain's conquest of southern Africa was Cecil Rhodes, an arch racist and an unabashed defender of European imperialism and colonization. To give you an idea of how he thought, here's Rhodes in his own words. It is our duty to seize every opportunity of acquiring more territory, and we should keep this one idea steadily before our eyes, that more territory simply means more of the Anglo-Saxon race, more of the best, the most human, most honorable race the world possesses. And by the way, this is the same Rhodes that the Rhodes Scholarship is named after. In 1890, Rhodes led the British conquest of Zimbabwe and named it Rhodesia, after himself. A little over a decade later, the British controlled 3/4 of the country and made the indigenous Africans tenants on their own land, forcing them to pay fees and taxes to live on the land that rightfully belonged to them. Taking the land and all the valuable resources that came with it made the British settlers incredibly wealthy. On the flip side, having their land taken, black Rhodesians were forced to become wage laborers, working for the white landowners for barely enough to scrape by. The typical white neighborhood in Rhodesia had big luxury houses with big lawns and gardens, while most black people lived in cramped substandard housing. The only black people that lived in the nicer white neighborhoods were domestic workers, who took care of household labor and landscaping. They lived on their white employers' properties. The white monopoly over the land also gave whites a monopoly over the Rhodesian political system, which was dominated by whites despite the fact that the country was overwhelmingly black. To give you an idea of how skewed Rhodesia's political system was, in 1976, Rhodesia's black population was over 6 million, while the white population was only 250,000. Despite this, of the 6 million black people in Rhodesia, only 9,000 had the right to vote. This allowed white voters to elect 50 members of Rhodesia's parliament, whereas black voters only elected 16. Many in the United States understandably compared this to Jim Crow. Rhodesia's Prime Minister Ian Smith famously declared that he would never support black majority rule in the country, not in 1,000 years. The government was so committed to white minority rule that it would go on to draft every white man under the age of 38 into the military to fight a bloody war against black liberation fighters instead of making concessions to them. However, no amount of conscription can change the reality that this country did not, nor did it ever, belong to white people. They had merely occupied it. Recognizing that a white-led government in southern Africa would never last, in 1979, the Rhodesian government pressured the black freedom fighters into an agreement called the Lancaster House Agreement in an attempt to salvage some semblance of white power.
If you were someone like myself who followed Western media, then you might have come across information like this. Zimbabwe is undergoing serious economic problems because the people are unable to put policies in place that favor growth and development of the country. I'm sure that is what you might have heard time and time and time again. Or Zimbabwe is broke because of the dictator Robert Mugabe, who has plunged the country into chaos and anarchy, and by so doing brought suffering and hunger and starvation upon the people. Well, if you listen to Western media, that is what you will get. And the most funniest thing is that this has been ongoing for more than 20 years now. I mean, the sanction. And the Zimbabwe economy has been suffering, and the people have suffered the most, right? They have really felt the pain, the pain of the sanction. But the Western media will never say it's because of the sanction that is causing these things to happen in Zimbabwe. They will never say that. All they will say is economic mismanagement, is that the people of Zimbabwe, mostly the policymakers, are unable or are unskilled in managing the economy. And that is why the economy is in free fall. That's what they will say. And for a long time, I believed that because remember, I told you that I am someone who has always followed the news. I have always been keen at knowing what was going on out there. And so I have followed the news from my childhood days. My friends were like very surprised, like, what's wrong with this guy? Why are you so interested in the news? But I have always loved to know what was going on all over the world. So I have followed this Zimbabwe issue, and they were like, the Zimbabweans are not equipped enough to manage the economy. The Zimbabwean has run the economy into the gutter. The Zimbabweans, with their leader, Robert Mugabe, have turned the country into a toilet. That was what you will hear the legacy media saying. They will never mention that the economy is suffering because of the sanctions that have been put in place by the West, aka America. They will never mention that. And why were they punished? Because Robert Mugabe wouldn't give in. Robert Mugabe wouldn't toe the line. Robert Mugabe wouldn't follow their narrative. And Robert Mugabe did what he thought was necessary to be done. He took back farmlands from the settlers and gave the lands to the local Zimbabweans, which is the right thing to do because the land belongs to the people of Zimbabwe, not the settlers. Not the settlers. Now, if they bought those lands from the government of Zimbabwe, that is a totally different story. But remember, Zimbabwe was colonized and ruled for many years by the British. So most of those lands were just given to those white people by the British government in Zimbabwe. Same thing in South Africa. Same thing, I think, in Namibia or I think Zambia, one of those Saudi nations. The same thing. The white people came in. They realized how good the land was. They realized how nice the country was. So they stayed and they kicked back the local Africans whom were the owners of the land. They carved out portions of the land for themselves and they cultivated and they turned the Africans who are the owners of these lands into their laborers. So someone came to your house, took over your house, and made you their houseboy. Now thinking about this out loud makes me laugh. Someone came into your house, took over your house from you, and turned you into their houseboy. And that is what has been going on. So when Robert Mugabe came in, he said, no way, this will not continue. I won't let you guys keep on taking advantage of us. There will be some land reform policies. And I am for the people. I am for the local Zimbabweans. So they will be taken care of first, which is the right thing to do. He seized those lands and gave it back to the local people. And the whites were very, very unhappy about it. And so they decided to do what? Since they couldn't stage a coup to remove him, they decided to do what? To place economic sanction on the whole country. And remember, they knew that this sanction was going to cripple the country and it was going to make the people to suffer. But they did it anyway. They did it anyway. That goes to show you, like I have mentioned on this show, that American foreign policy towards Africa has never been for all the Africans. Never ever. It has always been for what America stands to gain in Africa. It has never been for us, the African. No way. Never ever. When they come to Africa, they have a behind motive. They have what they are coming to get, and they have already worked out a plan on what they will give and what they will get. And the well being of the people is never on their agenda. But you guys out there, what is your take on the whole economic crisis in Zimbabwe? What do you think the people in Zimbabwe can do to recover from this economic crisis? Share your thoughts and opinions with us in the comment section below, because like always, we love hearing what you have to say. And also, please don't forget to like this video, share this video, follow our Facebook page, and most importantly, subscribe to this channel, because little bit of goodwill, like what you're doing just now, help us a lot. I shall forever be grateful to you. So thank you very much for doing just that. And like always, see you in the next one.